Welcome to another week of the Dojo Media Show. This is Dojo Media Co, Raph and Logan. And this week we're joined by a very special guest, Huda the Goddess, in fact. So tell me about the Goddess. Let's start with that.
Cool. The Goddess as I feel like the Goddess is my poetry persona, you can say. Mm-hmm. And the evolution of the Goddess, I used to be just Huda, which is my name. And then I used to be Cleopatra, which is like my culture showing up in my name, being African and Arab at the same time. And then the Goddess was kind of a title given to me as my poetry took on its own manifestation and kind of became very political and very cultural. And so the Goddess is a representation of that aspect of my existence, which is like art and advocacy and community work. And cultural knowledge and existence in that sense. So
someone gave it to you there.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. It's kind of like you can't go around calling yourself a good cook unless someone else tells you you're a good cook, right?
Bingo.
So a little bit more respect knowing that someone else gave it to you. That's good. That's good to know.
Thank you very much.
Let me just remove my phone from the area super quickly. Let's start with the fact that you are a poet anyway. And where did this come from? How did it begin? What were you sort of writing about in the early stages?
I think this is I've never really spoken about the origin of my like poetry. I think a lot of people assume that I was like a book nerd in school who loved poetry and reading and then like became a wordsmith. Totally not true, because I couldn't read or write until I was like 10, 11. Meaning like my experience with language was always strengthening my verbal speech because I couldn't write.
Yep.
So reading was kind of very complicated for me and a bit of a sticky, I enjoyed it, but not to the depth that people expect me to have enjoyed it. So poetry, I call myself the accidental poet. And when I first started my a Facebook page that my friend made me do, my bio was I talk a lot, some call it poetry, so I'll take it.
Yeah.
It was like, I wasn't married to this identity of being a poet. I was just good with words. So that relationship I built was like I used to like be a master of ceremony. So like I host like conferences and while I was still in college, and like through that, I met a very famous poet in the city named Anissa Nandala, who started Voices of Color. And she heard me like close off the ceremony that she was performing at. She goes, "Oh my God, you're an incredible poet." And I was like, I'm not sure I would call that poetry. And so she was like, "I'm pretty sure it is. I've been doing poetry for a while. I think that's poetry." And then she invited me to an event that I went and just like decided to, she was like, "You know what, just get up and do what you normally would do with telling stories on stage and see what happens." Yeah. So I did, and that kind of birthed poetry. Was an accidental space of meeting another poet who was like, "You just don't know what to call what you're doing, but here is me framing it for you." So my relationship with poetry has been accidental.
So you don't write? It's all based on words and sound, how it comes out of your mouth, how it flows, like...
So probably, like, I think I've been now in poetry, I'd say like 8, 9 years. Probably the first 3, 4 years of my poetry, nothing was written. So none of my poetry lived anywhere on page. Like I would get on stage, do a set, get off, and it would be done.
Yeah.
And I would tell people like, "Hey man, if you want to see this poet, if you don't remember or didn't record it, it's gone.
Yeah.
It's in the abyss."
Would you tell it again, but it would just change naturally, kind of like Chinese whispers sort of
Absolutely.
thing? Like,
yeah. So like there's some things that would stick that I really liked, like lines, and I'd be like, let's see what I can do with that in a different context or in a different picture. Does it still feel the same? Does it still hit the same? Yeah. So poetry for me was, I've always had a journal, and I still have this journal that I had that had a denim outline, to rip that out when I was like 13, and like just going through that, like writing for me was like an expression of like, my mom is pissing me off today, so I'm gonna write about it because I can't tell her because she's gonna beat my ass. So my writing process was venting. It was therapeutic, but it was for me. It wasn't performative. It wasn't like I want to be a writer. I hated poetry in school. Yeah. I found it incredibly boring and mind-numbing, and I was like, none of this relates to me. None of this intrigues me. So the birth of the Goddess really grew out of me sitting firmly in poetry. And it was when my poetry wasn't just impressive wordplay. It was a connection with somebody else that had people feeling something beyond like just listening to me. So I think the Goddess got birthed out of that.
I feel that from the time that I watched you do poetry. Like you just bring so much energy and like yourself into it. If you know what I mean? It's not like what I'd imagine a poet to be, a very introverted person. You're the complete opposite. Like You're a performer, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing too. As I evolved, I was around other poets and saw that. Like a lot of great poets are introverted people who sit in home and create a space for themselves and reflect and write. And then when they do a poetry performance, it's a reading. So I discovered the world of like the difference between a poet who just like writes, and then a slam poet who performs and lives on stage. So there's dynamics and so much more to enhance. So I think Huda was the introduction and me building the relationship with poetry. And as I firmly sat in that unapologetically, the goddess was birthed. Where now it's not me asking for permission. It is essentially asking you if you're willing to be in the space that I'm going to create regardless. So I think seeing that, and I met an elder who was like a professional speaker who I saw at an event like maybe 6 years ago. And after I got off stage, she asked me a question that probably monumentally changed poetry for me. And
Can you repeat the question?
She said to me, you do this thing you call poetry, but I wonder why is it that you speak? And I was
why is it, or what is it?
Why do you speak? And I was like, because I have to. And it was easy for me to come up with an answer, like for me, culturally and representing like marginalized communities. But it was a deeper question for me of like, why do I have to be the one to say it? Why do I feel compelled to tell the stories that I do? Where does that come from? So I went on this like journey of discovering why is it that I speak? And right after being able to come up with an answer that actually in 6 years' time has changed drastically. That answer has had its own evolutions.
And did it have moments of imposter syndrome too, where you're like, I'm not the person? Like, because even I feel it on such a smaller scale. Like if someone trusts us to make an ad for their business, sometimes I'm like, why am I the person to be doing this? Like, why am I the person to be representing you to like, so it's with anything you do, I feel like there's got to be an element of imposter syndrome.
Absolutely.
With that.
It's consistent. I don't think I've ever been so within what I'm doing that I'm like, I've never questioned it. Like, I don't know if I'm the right person to do this. I've had shows where I'm like, y'all are really trusting me with with a big space and a big topic. And it consistently reoccurs. Like as I'm producing work and writing a book, my imposter syndrome showed up so much in that process of like, I'm going to write stuff. Like my story is going to turn into ink, which turns into pages, which people are going to take home from them. And who am I to be to be a part of someone's intimate space, and then to ask for a currency in exchange, which is you welcoming me into your home and allowing me to take you into the story. And for a lot of, I think the greatest artists I have met have always had imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I agree.
But there's no denial that like they're supposed to be doing it.
Yeah.
But you don't have heaps of other people doing the same thing you're doing. Like you'd probably see a lot more in America, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to do what you're doing. There's not like a million other people out there doing it.
I think, and then like I've traveled around Australia and met like some incredible, there are incredible wordsmiths and poets in this country.
Yeah.
But again, like, I mean, this is a phenomenon, like we just don't value artists as much in this country. So there's not many spaces for them to exist. So you have to know somebody to find those artists in those spaces. So I feel like the one thing that I've been trying to do is to put myself in spaces you don't expect to see a poet at.
Yeah.
What are some places?
Oh, I've done shows at bars.
Yeah.
I've taught 7-8-year-olds basics 101 to poetry. I've done people's like private birthdays where they wanted to learn. I've done.
That's the way to do it though. That makes you stand out. People think that's never happened before. I've never seen that. First of all, why are you here? And then if you
all of that,
you get the opportunity to actually change them. But I want to just finish the previous point. So what answer did you tell yourself to that question? How does it change every day? What, even if it does change, why are you the person? Or how did you tell yourself that you are the person to tell these stories?
I think the first evolution of that answer was, I speak for a community of people who have never had their own voice.
The voice of the voiceless kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's also was an easy answer at the time, to give myself permission to keep writing, to keep speaking.
It's a surface level answer sometimes, isn't it?
Absolutely. And then like it evolved to my story deserves to be heard. And if I don't give it life, then it will never have it. But the position I've been, like once I won nationals and I was with a team that was recording me through the process of like doing this tour. And my cameraman was like, I was super anxious before I got on like Opera House to perform. And I was like, I've been asking myself recently, like, what's the evolution? When I say recently, it was 2 years ago. What's the evolution of why I speak? Like, where am I now that I've got this title, that I've done these shows around the world? Where is it now? And I'm like, before it was about giving people a voice. And before it was about keeping the door jarred open for people that look like me to walk in. And then it became, I actually cannot be your voice. Because what I do is rob you of the opportunity to speak because you think I'm supposed to be that.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can do is reiterate my reality with such conviction and passion that it gives you permission to even try to do the same.
50% of the people might relate entirely. 50% of the people might not. So
absolutely.
That's totally.
And finding the power and being like, you know what? I'm just gonna tell my story. And there's a universal claw to it, whether my story connects with you because of the fact that we're both Black, or that we're both women, or because we both went through pain. There is a reality within my story that somebody, almost everybody, will get a drop that feels like it's their moment.
You don't have to tell people how to relate. They're going to find their way.
Exactly, because it's truth.
Yeah.
So the
I
evolution.
don't even think they have to be that, though. They don't have to be like a Black or female, anything like that. Anyone can relate to it.
Absolutely.
He's telling about how you lost your job, and there's going to be people out there that are like, I lost my job. Like, no matter what persuasion they are, it's just a way to relate.
But I mean, even your really personal experiences, I think other cultures and people can really relate to it.
Absolutely, because I think what you're relating to is the emotion I encountered in that experience.
Exactly.
It's not specifically the experience, and it's nitty gritty, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the evolution has always been, how much of this is for myself, and how much of this art serves me? How much of it serves the community? And where is that evolution continuing? Like, people ask themselves big questions like, what is my purpose? And I'm like, I don't know if my purpose is one staple thing. Like, the arching theme might be connection and reviving storytelling. But how I do that is...
It's a journey.
There's so many endless possibilities.
My theory is our purpose is to find our purpose. It's a constant journey, and that you may feel like you're 99% there, you reach this little hurdle and you realize, oh no, that wasn't my purpose. Now I'm going to continue on the journey, find another thing. With this information still here, I'm still going to realize that I went through this, experienced this, and I have to carry this with me.
But I think at the same time, deep down, we all like have some idea of what we want to do. Like
I don't think what we want to do is our purpose though, right?
No, I mean like something we want to share with the world is like they're like behind everything else. Like
I think that's such a really dope question. I'm writing a collection called Lies They've Told Me. And it's like unpacking all the little things that people tell you growing up. Like, for example, this concept like time heals all. I don't know about that.
So these little sayings, not like Santa. Sorry, Santa.
Sorry. But like these just little rhetorics that are like consistently repeated amongst us, and that kind of form our like relationship with truth and what is reality that I think need to be challenged. I don't know what the purpose is, because it's such, for people there's like a religious purpose, which is like to worship and be connected to God and to appease that moral compass that is structured by your religion. There's also cultural purposes, which is community and family building. I don't know if purpose is this one stagnant thing.
No, that's it.
I've never seen it to be true for my life. And I feel like some of us have the capacity to find that little thing that drives us.
Yeah.
That little feeling. I don't know what it is.
That's why I think you're naively blessed knowing that you kind of have an idea of what you want to do. There are a lot of people out there that literally have
no clue.
Idea. Like you might even say, I want to make movies for a living, and that's so like that's so broad. That could mean anything. There's people that don't even have that. There's people that go,
no, I don't. I've thought about that a lot, but I also think sometimes it's hard. Like I've had times where I wished I just didn't know. Like I could just live a casual life and not care about anything else.
Oh. I tell people
do you think it's a burden sometimes, having all these thoughts in your head and all these things that or even trying to sort of carry a message when it was the voice of the voiceless days? Did it feel more of a burden? Has it ever felt like a burden?
I think it's tiring in the sense of like, there's always something to reevaluate. Like I have ADHD, and I also I'm a chronic overthinker. So like, just because I know what it is, doesn't mean I'm so bought on how to do it. So there's now becomes a fixation. Now that I found it, like, what am I gonna do with it? What is it gonna look like? Should it be bigger? The overthinking is tiring. The over-planning is tiring. And I feel like there are great poets in this, and I don't ever wanna take that away from them, but at times what I'm doing can feel very lonely. So being tired and alone in your visionary dream is a lot.
I think that's a big thing.
It's
lonely.
It's a lot. And I'm like, I wish I could just be like, if I was just creating like just writing poetry every day and like that's kind of the end goal, such a different relationship. But I'm creating and I want expansion and progress and community engagement and artist involvement and I want to take it to the world. I have such audacity, it's crazy. But it was also like...
So that's your answer to yourself almost.
Yeah.
You've got the audacity. And I don't think that's even a negative thing. It's like, I think to succeed, you need a level of arrogance and cockiness, not to a point where it's going to infect your relationships or anything like that. But to think that you can succeed.
You have to always want to do bigger and better.
Yeah.
You have to like, I spoke to a lot of great poets. Like I was talking to the world champ of like last year's poetry slam. And the greatest thing about it is you have to have the audacity. Like you just have to. Yeah. It's not even about ego. It's about like, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to succeed.
They say if you have the most talented person that does nothing with it, it's just wasting it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've met so many golden artists that it has nothing because they don't have the audacity.
Yeah.
You want to perfect it and you want to be at the vision board trying to get it right. Sometimes the only way to get it right is by starting it.
Yeah. I know you do. Like I've seen you go to Bali and Adelaide and like there's always some show, or you even just mentioned a few things you're starting now and creating.
Yeah, and again, it took audacity.
Yeah.
Like I went to...
It doesn't just happen.
Yeah, I went to London and me and my manager walked into an event that we looked up on Eventbrite. And it's called the Queens of Poetry. 150, 200 of like the Caribbean, like English community just in a room. And there was like music and poetry and comedy. And we were like, my manager is African American. And we're just in the back of the room like, oh my God, this is amazing. And there was just beautiful Black women filling up this energetic, like cultural, safe place. And as a traveling poet, I'm usually one of like very few poets, slam poets, one, and then Black, and then women. So like I'm like the minority of the minority. So being in this room, I was like, yo, this is sick. How do I create something that feels like this? Not just looks like it, but feels the way I feel right now.
And what was it? Community? Just...
Yes. Comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a sense of like, I get to breathe here.
Is it hard not always fitting into rooms?
Because I feel like I have to be on my A game all the time. There is no permission for me to fall or to not be as good as people expect me to be or think I am. And like when you're in a space where you're the only slam poet amongst a bunch of other people who don't even consider, like other poets who don't even consider slam poetry to be real poetry. So you got to prove yourself against the guy who's got 7 books and he's sitting and you only have 1 to your name and you have to be on cue the whole time. Then versus being probably the youngest in the room or the only Black woman in the room. There's so many subcategories where I'm different. Yeah. So I can't afford to step into a room unprepared or not on my A game. It's exhausting.
I don't want to minimize anything you just said because everything you face is totally real. But before we started recording, you said you like inflicting pressure on yourself.
Absolutely.
Do you think some of that is self-inflicted pressure? Like you walk into a room and feel that. Is it 100% that's what you're feeling, or you think you put it on yourself a little bit so you know that you're going to be on your A game, so that you don't have this comfort to use as a safety net sort of thing?
I mean, there's a degree of pressure sharpens me. So it's necessary that I am on cue. You cannot be lazy. Yeah, like you can't, when you value what you do, and there's a lot on the line, you cannot afford to be too relaxed. Yeah. So pressure is necessary. So there's a degree of it, me needing pressure to keep me sharp, to keep me also valuing the room that I'm in. So that means when I go into a room and I get hired for a gig and there's only maybe 50, 30, 40 people, the pressure allows me to be like, it doesn't matter how many people are in the room, they're expecting the goddess. Yeah. And if I get comfortable in being her all the time, that I don't give people my best, I'm letting the people who came to see me down and also myself and my artistry. Yeah. So that pressure is very necessary to keep me sharp. But there's a lot of it of like, I sat on a panel in Bali where we talked about like, am I in my head about this? Or is this the reality of the room I look like that I'm in? But when you speak to Black poets from London, from Belgium, from Paris, from Cameroon, from South Africa, and everybody thinks the same thing, it's not just me. Yeah. Because it's easy to be like, okay, maybe I think that because I am the other. But everybody has this collective experience of you have to be on game all the time.
What would you say like the average poet comes across as? Is there like a certain characteristics or? Or like age or anything?
It differs. I think Brisbane is also probably one of the most chillaxed, loving and supportive of upcoming artists that I've experienced.
So you like being here?
Yeah, like there's a sense of come up and try.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like let the small person give it a go kind of thing.
Oh, and it's beautiful because we have the opportunity to birth artists and enable people that are in their shells to really come out and try and build that within themselves. So it's very, very different here. Like poetry at a poetry event here is like probably like a middle-aged, woman who writes poetry sometimes, who's here at an open mic with a bunch of her girlfriends, trying out a piece she has on her phone. Or maybe a younger activist who's in their like 23 and is thinking deeply about the world and they're sharing that.
So where are the largest competitions in the world? London, I'm guessing.
Well, there's the World Championship that I went to last year, which is probably the largest in terms of like.
And where's that?
It's hosted in a different country every year. So last year was in Belgium, this year it's in Brazil, Rio.
Awesome. How was that?
Amazing. I was the first Australian to ever be invited to represent Australia. Thank you.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I was the first representative in the 20 years that we've had slams here, like officially as a body. Incredible. I got to meet 40 of the top poets in the world.
Like you're etched in history. Like in 50 years is going to be like the next they'll be like, the goddess was the first person.
Pretty much.
Everyone else is just what's under a goddess. Like, what's a princess to a queen? What's that?
I think queen after?
Something, maybe.
Yeah. But I'm like, I'm the first one that did it. But it was an incredible experience because it wasn't even about the competition for me. It was more about the people because I got to see 40 different experiences of art around 40 different countries. So speaking to, a poet from Cameroon, a poet from Brazil, a poet from America, Canada, New Zealand, I got to get the scope and the relationship. And there are countries in the world where poetry is not a joke. It's not a thing you do on a Friday. It is a skill.
Which places take it the most seriously?
Oh, like South Africa?
It's huge.
Pooh! But they have the best wordsmiths in the world for a reason.
Yeah.
Because to them, it's not a joke. Like there are places where I heard like, it's a rigorous rating system where like you get on stage, like I've heard the world champ poet at one point go like a 0 point something in one of his poems. He's not the world champ. Undeniably one of the best slam poets I've ever seen breathing. Yeah. And he's like, I've gone low scores because my poetry didn't hit, or I didn't write authentically, or my bars weren't clean.
Do you think you have to just take big swings and sometimes that's going to mean a big miss?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's the boldness with the arts is like, you don't know sometimes how it's going to read. Yeah. And when you have like 40 different writers, so many styles.
Is it in any way like similar to comedy? Like you just don't know how it's going to work out?
No, there's a little bit more I think comedy's a whole different hard world because I know a few comedians. There's nothing worse than not getting laughs. Oh, Lord.
Anything could be done. Like, you could have a room full of drunk people that just don't want to listen.
Oh, poetry.
So people who watch poetry really come there like to give them a chance and...
And again, honestly, it also depends. Like there are countries around the world where poetry spaces are occupied. The people that get on the mic are poets.
Yeah.
They're not just people trying out poetry.
Yeah, right.
They've been doing this. But there's other places like Brisbane, not people that would call themselves poets, but people who do write poetry. So it very much differs depending on the relationship with the arts they've developed. Places like the UK, poetry's been, like slam poetry here is still relatively new in terms of like, we're talking about like this community of people. Yeah. But sorry, so yeah, it's a very different relationship. But like places, I think Americans have always taken this seriously because it's like Chicago is the birthplace of slam poetry. So they're very like on with poetry. But like, South Africans, Nigerians probably.
What happens at the World Championships? Like there must be so many different languages. Is there like one judging panel and they just kind of have to
Is there a translator?
Even if they can't understand
No.
Or...
So the poem has to be sent before and it gets translated into all the main languages that are present. So it gets translated into Spanish, Portuguese, and French.
Just perform it in their native.
And then there's a screen playing of the translation behind it.
Yeah.
Do they get judged on the way they tell it?
Yeah, absolutely. So cadence, performance, language. Right? So normally, again, probably the world champ has a different scale for its own rating, but like here, like the base to look at is like say out of 10. It is like say 4 points for writing, 4 points for performance, and 2 points for like really taking it over the bar. So getting a 10 is supposed to be incredibly hard. Yeah. Incredibly hard. But I think every country has its own voting system and what they consider to be a priority, and there's probably more like a breakdown of like what actually gets points. It's also like, you know, people always ask me like, what's considered a poem? Like when does a poem become a poem? You know what I mean? Like, can me telling a story become a poem? Like, the basic rule is like, once you start using language devices, then you've started doing poetry. There's no metaphors, there's no similes, there's no double entendres. You don't have a poem, you just have a story.
Yeah.
And they're very different. So, yeah. But it's not a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Everything, depending where you are, who teaches you poetry, the rule is very different.
So what were these devices you were using in your early days that people were picking onto, realizing that you were doing poetry without you even realizing? What do you think it was? Like you were just really good at similes, or?
Yeah, like this is the I think something I actually discovered really recently when I did my documentary. When you don't speak English as the first language, you don't know the words for something, so you describe it.
Right.
And you go like, so it's in your language to go, you know, like this. You don't say yellow, you go like this. Like flower pebbles. You don't say the word. That's essentially poetry. So I've always spoken, instead of giving you the word, I describe the word to you. So instead of telling you the feeling, I'll tell you how it felt on me. And you go, oh, sadness. So I think that's how I've always spoken, is by creating pictures and image and creating warmth. And the only thing I could depend on is my capacity to relate it to something you know, so that you understand me. And making sure that my tone is clear, because I don't know what the word is. And it's poetry, saying the word without using the word.
Try giving it as much context without
Absolutely.
saying it.
And then you get sharper over time, where the images or the similes get cleaner and they get more profound, and they require people to kind of like go, wait, can you say that again? Because I think I got one layer, but I think there's more to it. So your language over time for me evolved as I was like, I realized what I was doing, and then how can I layer it and make it more powerful and make it more intense. So
wow, I feel like there's almost a cultural difference just between like Australia and America. It was something, I don't know where it came from, but things I used to watch, like Americans love using just like similes in random conversation. Like they'll just be like, oh man, that person was running down the road faster than whatever, you know, whereas Australians are much more just like a term over here is fuck off. Like it's fuck off big, you know, like that kind of thing. It's like, that's not a language device. That's nothing. You're just like throwing some words together and making it a thing. And I'm wondering, just had a little mini thought there, I was like, I wonder if just culturally the language difference there, I wonder if that's why it's so much more common in America.
We'll see.
Or even like appreciated more over there, because they kind of speak like that. Closer, in my opinion.
Well, this is the interesting thing, right? Like, I was raised in Australia, and I grew up in Cairo before coming here. So I actually have no relationship with America at all. My accent developed as the fact that my Arabic dialect sat in an American accent. But Arabic is like that too. Arabic is very detailed. Well, we don't just say go. We don't say like just imshi. We say imshi hinak. We go like go over there. There's a directiveness and a very like clear imagery when you speak, which is why I don't cuss in Arabic. Because cussing in Arabic is very, very clear. When I swear in Arabic, it's vulgar. Saying the F word here is like, you hear it around the corner. It doesn't mean anything. Doesn't always be taken as like fighting words.
Where I throw it in a positive set, like you could be angry, happy, whatever.
We don't do that. Curse words don't just sit in the middle of normal conversation. They're a curse word. They have a place and a time and a meaning and intensity behind them. So I think definitely that I just listening to my mom talk, who's not a poet, her language intensity and the way she uses just words is so profoundly different.
Is there a place for swearing in poetry?
Absolutely. Hell yeah. But it also has to be, I think it's intentional. There's a tactfulness to like things like being loud or swearing or comedy. You have to know when to put them and how to say them for them to land.
You don't just want to be like a screaming monkey on stage, but...
And people do. People do it, I promise, and it's not good. It's a hit and miss.
Are there slam poets out there trying to do like shock poetry?
Oh yeah, well like, I've heard so much poetry, it's ridiculous. And I think everyone's style is also really distinctive to them. Like, there are people who only write comedy stuff, which is funny the whole time. But I think that's really hard to pull off.
And at the World Championships, is that like, it's a mixture of everything? There's some like social,
a lot more deeply, it's deeply political or deeply personal. It's like very intense stories of self. And I find that the best poets in the world, or the people that people want to listen to, have a certain depth, and their work isn't as light. In terms of like, even if they're talking about love, it's gut-wrenching. Even if it's a good love story, it's like, whoa, I'm really thinking with you. I'm really with you. I don't really know many like well-known poets that they're like, you know, they write about cheeseburgers or something. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Possibly
it's an
exist.
intellectual art, like
Yeah.
more than others.
So I think it requires a lot of the, when you want to hear poetry, you don't want to hear comedian
Or
poetry.
something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't go to poetry to laugh.
But you might get a good laugh.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's some people that are like great. Like Rudy Fiasco has a lot of humor in a lot of his poetry, but it's very nicely placed.
Yeah.
So
I want to talk about your life outside of poetry as well. Like, what other stuff do you get up to?
So poetry is actually, like, I always say, I'm going to say this forever, I'm an accidental poet. So everything that happened in my poetry, just stack it on accident. I went to get my state championship title because I just was like, oh, there's no black young people in that. I'm going to go sign up, and then I ended up winning. Then the next year I was like,
But
damn.
did you expect that you had a chance to win? No.
I freestyled everything until winning nationals.
Yeah.
So there was no scripted poetry. It was just like, I'm going to go do this because somebody has to do it, and I'm going to take up space. So I won state, then I won it again, and then I won nationals in my house with no poem written.
At what age was this?
This was like 2-3 years ago. I won nationals. All of that was an accident. Everything else in my life had a lot of strategic input.
Yeah.
So like I work like as a cultural liaison officer in schools, and my main objective academically is creating a safe school systems for young African diaspora kids, for young African kids, and teaching diversity and inclusion. And like, so I designed a program called the Black Excellence Program, which is about mentorship and teaching culture, and really having some hard conversations that my community needs to have with it itself, but also with the education system. So I came from a background in working with the indigenous organization called AIM and mentoring young indigenous kids for 4 years. Then I transitioned out to then like going to a school and going, here's a job proposal. Here's what I want to do. I don't even know if this job exists, but I want to do it. And the principal was like, yeah, this sounds great.
That's what I was thinking. Like, does that job exist? Like,
Not
you kind of
really.
created something, which is pretty awesome.
It started, I think like there was a hint of it, but it was not seen as a staple job to have.
It seems like, if anything, more of a uni thing than a high school.
Exactly. Yep. Because they have like, you know, people in charge of like the African, But so I started with one school. I then designed the project for them and then thought, how can I get this program to be utilized in other schools? Then I took it to like Ipswich region. I did 4 programs, fully funded. And then I won nationals, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go tour and figure out this thing, and then I'm going to come back to it. So this year I've built a team of people. We restructured the program, and next year I go back into a model with like 6 schools under my belt and more funding and an expansion, and then a research paper with the University of Sydney. So my life outside of poetry kind of relates in the sense of like, my students are like, Miss, I've seen you on TV. Or Miss, my sister knows who you are because you do the poetry. So
sounds like your purposes align.
Absolutely. I think I'm an educator. Yeah, I'm an educator by, if anything, if I have to name my purpose, is I'm an educator. And that just kind of shows up poetically, and then it shows up in my professional job, and they kind of align. And dance was always kind of like just for me. It was my healing. It was never about competition. It was never about...
What sort of dancing?
So I'm in a crump dance fam called the Bang Universe. And then I do the style called Flood. And then I do Afro, which is like a cultural style. And now I'm part of like the ballroom scene in I Vogue. But I mainly
You're
like...
doing everything.
Yeah. Listen, I don't really sleep.
Yeah, I was going to say, are there 2 of you?
They need to be. They need to be another
I really
one
want to
here.
know, with the stuff you're doing in schools, what impact does that have on the kids?
Oh,
Well, like, what have you seen so far?
when I first started this project, I started like a brotherhood program for a lot of the young boys that were like dealing with like gang affiliations and all of this stuff. So I built like these group of like probably like 20, 30 boys when I was in school, and they would come see me every break. And like at first it doesn't seem like anything, like, you know, like you're the teacher that they want to talk to. So I'd be sitting there trying to do emails, and I've got all these boys telling me about sports I know nothing about, or sneakers, or a song they want to play for me so I can hear it. And then I established with them like this like really beautiful relationship where we talk, and I'd ask them questions like, you know, what's your relationship like with your dad? What programs would you like me to build in the school? And then one highlighting moment for me was like one day there was a school fight that broke out with my younger African kids. And then I sent one of the boys, I was like, hey, I don't want him to get in trouble. I need you to go, like, I need somebody to go jump to break this fight up. But while I was talking to one of the kids, the other boys had broken it up, brought the kid to my office and sat him down and started talking to him about how he shouldn't be doing stuff like that. And I sat down and watched my students take over the leadership and become each other's support system, where it was like, we can't let Miss down because she always has our back. But we also can't let each other down, because if you act up, they all look at us like we're all acting up. And it built this sense of unit for them. And it was like watching kids that had like a 25% attendance rate start showing up all the time because I built a program and no one wanted to miss it. Watching kids who wouldn't listen to anybody trust me to vouch for them, to build a relationship with them. And then taking it to schools where I had one of my, like, we always have like debriefs. So it's like, oh, circle, let's all together. How was your day? How you feeling? And one of the kids, she doesn't really talk. She comes to every program, very, very quiet. Always love to have her, but she just really didn't engage with anybody as much. She'll do the activities. And I was like, what keeps bringing you guys here? Like, you know, you come every week, it's after school, it's full. You could be at home playing PlayStation or just laying down. Why are you here? And she was like, my father passed away when I was in grade 9. And this is me and her voice. And I felt like it changed me a lot. And she goes, I think if you were here, or this program was here when I was in grade 8, I would have been such a different person right now with my school and who I am as a person. But even though I'm sad, I'm still really grateful that you came now, because I think I'll be very different after this. And I kept having moments with kids. I just saw one of my kids who at some point was at risk of getting expelled, and now he's possibly going to be school captain next year. Who was like, Miss, you got to come on Friday if I get my badge, because I got to let everybody know that you were the teacher that vouched for me when they were about to kick me out. So I had monumental moments with these kids where I was like, I was the first kid to see them. Like, I was like, yo, I'm just like you. I was the rowdy kid in school, and it was about building that relationship. And this program holds so much value to me because I wish I had somebody that looked like me, who could understand the complications of my life, and that could just validate that I see you, but your life doesn't have to be chaos. You don't have to come out here and be outrageous. There's a way to heal from this. And it truly fills my heart to see, like, I'm only 28, but I walk around and like, I see kids of mine. I was injured a few months ago, like maybe a year ago, and I saw one of my kids who I didn't even teach, mind you. I was just a teacher aide at Urunga, and I used to see him every break and we'd have banter. And I started this rapport with him where like I would tell him something random that I learned or a tip, and we built this relationship. And he saw me after he graduated. He was 19 at the time, and he was like, yo, he had his partner with him and stopped. He was like, yo, I remember you. You always used to say hi to me no matter what day it was, and I still talk about you today. I didn't teach him nothing. We just interacted. You know, he stopped, helped me get to my car, waited until I was safe. And it was those moments for me that make this program valuable, is that there are kids out there that don't have the space and don't get seen for who they are. It's like, oh, you're a kid. How bad can your life be? It can be fucking horrible.
You know what I like? Like, we all know that you've struggled a lot in your childhood and gone through a lot, but like you've used that instead of just complaining and saying like my life was hard, like a lot of people do. You're using this to really help people.
Yeah, so where did it come from? You said you didn't have anyone like this in your childhood. Where did the sense of needing it come from?
Because somebody had to do it.
But did you have anything? Did you have like church groups or anything? Like if it wasn't at school, was there something, or you just knew that it was missing? I mean, so you wanted to be that?
I think once in a while when I really needed it, like the universe or God or whatever you believe in sent me somebody. Like, and I had a mentor, like grade 7, Miss Turner, who was in New Zealand. I remember her so well. She had like an All Blacks flag on the table, like, and she'd be like, what's the best team? We'd be like, All Blacks. And like, she was the first teacher who unapologetically believed in me. There was just no shadow of a doubt in her mind that I was good, that I was smart, and that I was gonna do it.
I think it makes a huge difference. I think kids really remember the person that makes them feel good. Like I've emailed 2 teachers, I think, since leaving school. Really? But the email was like, thank you so much for what you did for me, basically. Like, you gave me direction, you showed that I was skillful. Like, it was just, I don't know, my girlfriend's a teacher at the moment, and she comes home sometimes and is like, it's not as rewarding as I thought it would be day to day, she says. Like, you know, I don't feel like I'm changing a kid's life day to day. I'm like, you're probably not going to know this until like 5 years in the future, or like once these kids have graduated and they've been out of school for a little while, and they'll be sending messages being like, Miss, it was actually you that like brought me to school these days, kind of thing. And I think today's actually World Teacher Day, so a little clap for the teachers out there. Yeah. She showed me a little Snapchat of that being said, some like little cute notes that are student-centered, like, you're the best, miss. Like that's awesome. But yeah, that's such a powerful thing, knowing that you've literally changed the scope of a kid's life, essentially. Like,
and especially in Ipswich, like places that people judge a lot.
That people don't even want to touch.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, I don't even want to go there. It's going to be hard. But it's like, sure, it's going to be hard. But like, I know that somebody looked at me at some point and thought, ooh, I don't want to go there. But it was the teacher that was like, no, we can go there. And I became an academic because of that teacher. If it wasn't for her and like and she applied pressure. Like, we're going to do it. We're going to submit the assignment. Like, I went from a kid who could not read or write to topping all my classes. I was a straight A student after her. Like, I was in the books because I was like, no, all I need is one person to believe in me. And sometimes that is only me. But when there's an odd moment, when there's another person who truly, and despite your chaos, your clumsiness, your failure, goes, you can do it. That is magic.
I think for creative people too, because so much of our creativity is just ourselves. So even if it's not something creative that we've made, but they're saying like, you can do this maths problem. We're like, yes, we can. All I didn't have was the self-belief. And that's amazing.
All you need is that person to give you that push. And I feel like everything I've been creating is not just
you're that person for a lot of people.
And oh man, and there are a lot of people who don't even think they are, that have given me permission by simply existing to be me.
Yeah.
Like, I walk in rooms and I'm like, yo, that's lit. I'm gonna radiate that energy because I like it. You know what I mean? Giving yourself, my favorite quote has always have been is like, our greatest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It is not our dark, but our lightness that we fear the most. And it is that simple principle of like, I want to be that person that you want to emulate the energy of. And it is my job to make sure I am so centered within myself that just me doing what I do gives you permission to do that. And that's what I do for my kids every day, is like, my story is not perfect. My narrative is clumsy. It still continues to be clumsy. Failure is inevitable. It is absolutely inevitable. But suffering sometimes is a choice. And I choose not to suffer. I choose not to allow that to be the rhetoric. And every project that I've had the audacity to create, the goal has been, not only do I want you to feel safe, I want you to feel safe failing here. Because your failure does not determine how much faith I have in you. It does not determine where you're going to be tomorrow.
So giving people a chance who doubt themselves,
Absolutely.
which is huge, because so many people doubt themselves that are really talented.
Oh.
So extremely talented people, but their parents haven't been good to them and all that.
I think even like people might think they literally will die if they like hand in a bad assignment or something, you know? It's like, you just need to do it sometimes.
Yes.
You just need to do the bad thing and realize that it's like falling over. You just sometimes need to fall over, realize you're going to hurt your elbow. It's going to sting for a couple of days, but
you learn to land different next time.
Yeah. Back on the speeches, something that the first thing I heard about you was the ABC segment.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Tell us about that. For anyone that doesn't know, like, what was it? How did that come about? You said something about educating people on yourself before. That was pretty much, you educated me on your story and yourself in that. So yeah, tell us about that.
I recently did an ABC feature for a show called Artworks, and it's a segment called Slammed. And the idea was like, ABC really wanted to feature poetry and put it on like mainstream TV. And the incredible producer of the show literally just found a video of me on YouTube and was like, I really like your voice. I really like this poem. And just like found me on Instagram, because my name is Huda the Goddess on most of my socials. So I keep it linked.
Consistent.
Yeah, so he just messaged me and was like, hey, I saw this and I would love to be able to bring you to Melbourne for the studio to kind of shoot this. This is probably my pro and my greatest con is like, I'm like, oh, cool, creation? Cool, I'm in. You don't really have to tell me too many details, as long as I'm not going to die, I'll be there.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
And the day beforehand, you realized you knew nothing. Like,
I'm cool. I'm like, I'm here. YOLO, we're going to make it work.
You don't think about the
didn't know if it was going to be 20 minutes or 5 seconds. Like,
I'm just like, I'm here, vibes.
We did that too.
We had a phone conversation, and like, you know, he was like, we really love this poem. It's powerful. It resonates. Little do they know, I'm a freestyle poet. So I was like, I want to preface that anything you've seen of me has been a freestyle, even from my national to international performances. So I don't actually have anything scripted. So I'm going to have to like transcribe the poem and get it. So he's like, we can do that for you. We can transcribe it for you. And he's like, you can post other videos. And I was like, this is a very old poem that if I was writing right now would be written very differently, just because my stylistic tone has changed. But like, it's a poem, trigger warning, about my mother's DV experience when I was very young. And I was like, this is a poem that means a lot to me, and I want to be able to kind of do it justice. But I also, there was a thing about that specific video registering and hitting so hard that he was like, we all watched it. The host of the shows watched it, and it really created an emotion, and we would love to do that one. I was like, you know what? Who am I to argue? If it hits with people, then it does. You know what I mean? Let's not be too of a perfectionist about it. So I went to...
Sorry to interrupt. Like, A, is your mum around? B, if she is, did you have to ask permission to use this story?
She is around, and I've told her about the story.
Okay.
Yeah, so she knew about it when I first performed it. And
She was completely fine with you putting it on TV?
Yeah, she was fine. She watched the video. She's like, this is cool.
Yeah. That's awesome.
In the poem, I say my mom doesn't classify herself as a victim. Like, that instant for her was like, you tried me and you learned not to try me again. So that's how she tells the story. Yeah. It's very
bring
different.
Up sad memories.
But she tells it like, no, you tried to, and that didn't happen. So my mom doesn't associate herself with like being a victim. That's not in her mentality at all. So it's a complicated thing. It took me a really long time to tell any stories about my mom because they're not my stories.
Yeah.
Yes, I was in them. Yes, they affected me, but they're not my stories. So I was also reluctant to have it on TV. I was like, ooh, it's one thing to perform it at a slam and for it to be on a YouTube, but it's a whole another thing for it to be on TV.
Yeah.
But she was like, oh, like, do your thing. And I was like, all right, cool.
Awesome.
I'm going to go record it. And I did. And I honestly didn't expect anything to come of it. It was like, cool, this is a great commission job. ABC was incredible. Like, they were so, like, welcoming to the fact that I'm an improvised poet and this is not written. So you're asking me to memorize something that my brain has no relationship with. So I'm going to have to, like, do a lot of techniques I've developed over time to retain the poem. So they were very, like, understanding. They just did beautiful things like, how do you look? How do you feel about how you look in terms of this color on screen? Does this feel like you're looking at yourself and that we haven't edited you too much? They were just very, very considerate and really built a lot of safe space for me. And like my first take, they were like, okay, do we need a second? Because that was very, like, it was big. The poem is big. And like how I am on camera was not acting. That's exactly how I felt to doing the poem. Like, this is, whoa, I'm really, like, telling such an incredible story of somebody that I admire and respect so much. And this is such a great, it's not a good story, but it's also a story that always reiterates how powerful my mother is. So for me, it is a point of celebrating her victory, you know, and that she is very much not a victim in her eyes. You know what I mean? And then the video blew up and I was like, oh, okay, cool. I was like, it got posted 6 hours. I looked at my phone and I had more messages than I could count. People were calling me like, oh my God, like, I didn't know this was a story for you. And I'm like, people calling me crying, paragraphs from like strangers. And it wasn't even it wasn't even what you could see. It was what people could not see. That was like, I was like, it got shared like 300 times. And then the people wanted to really engage with me. So sometimes you underestimate certain creations and the value of them. And you're like, oh, I did that. It was cool project. And now you just move on to the next one. And that was one of those.
Do you think it's because your own story? It's your own story. So you're not far enough removed to realize how crazy, exciting, awesome, funny it might be. Like,
do you make something completely different up every time?
Yes.
You must have a lot of life experience.
Yeah. So it's like,
yeah.
And even if I tell a story, I always tell it from like different angles. So there's sometimes where I tell the story as if I'm the observer. Other times I tell if I was my mom. Other times I tell if I was a stranger. So there's a lot of angles to tell the same story from that creates a whole different story. But I'm going to assume you've said things, whether it's years ago when you started, that you now disagree with, whether it's ideologically, politically, socially, anything. I honestly try not to be. Some things have evolved. I don't have a relationship with them anymore. How do you live with that? I guess that sounds really deep. But how does it bother you that opinions that have changed that you may not disagree with or that you may not agree with anymore are still out there, or like you're happy to sort of, if someone confronts you about it, you're more than happy to go, I did feel this way. It seems
like people more follow what you're doing recently than.
Yeah, I'll go there though.
Yeah.
I've never.
Do you think that's important though? Like, would you rather have stuff that you now disagree with, so there is a little bit of contrast in your?
No, there's definitely. I think there are things in my work that I'm like, I'm not there anymore. I don't feel that way anymore.
Yeah.
Like I would love to. People can go there with me. Like I think. I'm not married to anything being a forever truth that much. I'm okay with my reality changing, and that rule that I had a year ago not being relevant anymore.
You're saying what your perception is now, and
yeah,
that could change. Yeah.
And
you have to really commit to where you are at the time.
But yeah, I will say what I say now with conviction because I firmly believe it.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean
You
that
might look back in a year and be like, I was an idiot. Like,
it was like that worked then, but for the version of me that exists now, it doesn't work.
yeah.
It's not to say that it's not even valid anymore. It's just not valid for the person I am. But I'm willing to go there. Like this is as much as I'm so humbled by the support. I have no desire to be liked by strangers. It does nothing for me. I love y'all. I do not care.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to go there.
You care about the people you care about.
And I care about humanity as a mass. And I care about the work that I produce and its impact. I care about my artistry. And I'm intentional and precise to the information that I know, right? But I also leave room for myself to evolve and learn more and get better as I evolve with time. But like, if a stranger was like, oh yeah, you did a poem a couple years ago that I didn't like or didn't resonate with, I'm like, all right, then go ask Huda from 2 years ago. Yeah. Also, we can unpack now why I felt that way, because I'll stand on it. I'm not moving perspective because you don't like it.
Yeah.
It doesn't change my reality. Like, there's a lot of people that have pushed back on the fact that like, you know, I write poems about, racism a lot. And people are like, oh, do you think that's a reality? I'm like, yeah. If I live it, then it's a reality. Just because you don't have it doesn't mean it's not real. Just because you don't see it. I've never seen a helicopter. I know they exist. Like, it doesn't need to be in my face and in my constant for you to have to, like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I think people expect a much more deeper connection with how people receive my work. I don't give a shit. If it lands, wonderful.
Yeah.
And I would love that.
Does your work all reflect your life in Australia or some of it in Egypt?
No, it's everywhere.
Just
yeah,
places
I have very like clear moments with like my grandmother that I write about. Yeah. And she passed away when I was very, very young. But no, my story is a lot of different moments. Like a lot of the most traumatic things that have happened to my life were actually in Cairo, Egypt. But like a lot of my race did not become a variable until I was in Australia. Me being black was not an identification I had until I was here. I was just
I've heard like some people suffer racism in Egypt.
Absolutely.
Pretty bad.
But you don't know it.
You don't know
in
it
that
there.
lens.
It's different.
But here, race is a conversation. So therefore, you know it in a different lens.
Yeah.
But nah, like, yeah, I'm completely willing to evolve. Like this, people have asked, like, how do you feel about sharing traumatic stories? And I'm like, man, I'm very cautious and I take care of my audience. And I let people know, hey, man, I'm about to go there. You can absolutely leave. And I respect that. Take care of yourself before anybody else. But I owe my art and myself the truth. My art is for me first and for you secondary. What you do with the art that I drop is your business.
So then with that, you say there's like an element of pressure to be the goddess at all times, to show up, to be what people are expecting and what you expect of yourself. What do you do to blow off steam then? Like, do you ever just put your phone in front of you and just do some slam poetry that no one's ever going to see, just so you literally get some things out? And like, yeah, how do you get things out that no one is going to see, or like clear the shit tank of creativity?
Like I do poetry every day.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff you'll never hear.
Yeah.
So like poetry for me is for me first. So it's therapeutic. It's how the pen and paper are my first therapist. Or just, I would say in my context, verbalizing poetry is my first therapy. So I do these things for me. No poem that I ever write about is something I'm still working through. A lot of the times, it's something I've already made peace with.
Yeah.
I don't drop things that reignite my own trauma. I'm very like firm with that. I don't want to keep getting on stage and feeling drained or low or that I've wasted energy. So I make peace. In my head, I've written versions of it. So when I'm freestyling, this is like the 8th version, probably tonight. Like I'll sit in a room before I get on the mic and I'm like, da 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 da. And I've done a bunch of random poems in a room about something else. So I've cleared myself. I've meditated around the space. Yeah, my poetry, I'm very selfish about my art. It belongs to me.
Yeah.
And if I don't have a relationship with it outside of performing it on stage, then it becomes a chore, an exhausting chore.
It's almost like I see a bit of a tangent, but like bands that have been in the game for like 20 years or something, you kind of tell the later albums are like clearly just written on the road or like written for more like the stage kind of thing. And it's like, there was obviously just a clear disconnect, like in the earlier days when it was in the studio or just like for yourself, like as people in a room trying to do it as fun for them. And it must be like, you must sort of experience the same thing in like comedy and in poetry and any sort of performance art, where eventually it does just become monotonous is the wrong word, but just like more formulaic, I guess.
Absolutely.
Less authentic.
Yeah, it's different. Like I've recently been doing a lot of shows where like it's a tour, so it's the same show and you just repeat it over and over again. Very new to me.
Yeah.
When I won nationals, I traveled with Miles, who was my manager at the time, and he was like, I know that you're a freestyle poet, but I want to see this in action. So we went on the road together. So he watched every show. I had like 28 shows in 25 days. It's 15-minute set every single day after teaching a 2-hour workshop. And he was like, I 100% believe you. Yeah. I don't think I've heard the same poem twice in 28 shows. He's like, I don't know how that's possible. I'm like, I'm a little manic, sir. Okay? There are 3 billion things going on in my brain, and what inspires poetry is so different. So I've always been really conscious of the fact that like, it will definitely have that moment. I think it's inevitable, especially when you're doing tours or like installations or a specific show that you're repeating, or that you also sometimes have to write strategically. You have to write for a commission job. So it needs to be a certain stylistic choice, or it needs to be a little bit lighter in terms of the way that I write. Like some poems, I strategically write them with not the strongest language device, not the strongest that it can be, because I'm aware of my audience. Yep. If I go into a room and no one's ever heard poetry, I'll drop something very light and see the engagement level, then I'll take it up a notch. And then we'll see where everybody is. But you have to be strategic in the way that people receive your work.
Yeah.
But I never want to get to a point where it's like, and again. Even with my book launch, I'm like, I'm not doing a book reading. Yeah. I'll be damned if I sit at a goddamn stool and read poetry at y'all for 20 minutes. That is not me. That is not happening. But yeah, it's also like me knowing myself, and then I don't want to get to that point with my art because I think I will enjoy it less.
There's a comedian that I follow who puts it in a very different way, and he's the same thing. Like obviously comedians have a routine, they need to repeat night after night. He says he can't, like he needs to make something new every night. Same sort of story, he'll take a big swing and it'll be a big miss sometimes and the audience like won't respond at all. Sometimes it'll be massive and it'll like create uproarious laughter. But he says he doesn't like doing it because he feels like he's lying to the audience because he's already said this before in this way. Do you feel that way at all? Like you've already expressed it in this way. Try something else, or
or do you see it as a new audience every time?
Yeah, like it can't be a lie if it's still the truth. It doesn't matter how many times you say, like you asking me if I had lunch and I say yes, and you asked and I said yes. It's not lying to him because I said it to you. It's just a different person. No, I don't feel about it that. I think it's for me, for my own engagement with the poetry. Like
to keep it fresh.
If you want me to be the goddess, if you want the intensity and the visceralness that I come with, that only comes when I feel connected to what the hell I'm saying. And I can't feel that way.
Reciting lines.
Yeah, if I'm doing the same show 6 times, I'm doing the same poem, it's a lot more labor off stage to get myself to that point. And now I'm exhausted. Yeah. And I don't care enough to be exhausted. I don't want to be exhausted. I'm not doing poetry to be exhausted. Yeah. It's far from the reason I chose to be an artist. So, yeah.
I want to know, what's the biggest challenge you've ever had? Or like your biggest challenge as a poet?
Oh, like the art versus profit, the conversation about, like, one big thing people told me when I started to like really be in the scene was like, oh, just accept like, poetry books just don't make that much. And that art is just like the thing you do on the side that you love and create projects, but that's kind of it. And I was like, huh? What do you mean? This is my soul in ink. And you're trying to tell me to accept just nothingness for it? And that's the bar? No, I rebuke it. I don't want it. That is not a reality I'm willing to accept. And the challenge, like for me, beyond that is like, I am so married to the creation, and I always I want it bigger, and I want more people to hear it, and I want it to be experienced by more people. And then the challenge is always like resources and money and the audience and the marketing and all of that. And I'm like, sometimes I just want to do the art. and let the art draw people in. But that's not the reality we live in. And there's sometimes like a question of, if you care about the profit so much, then do you care about the art? You know what I mean? I'm like, I don't think that's a fair question to ask. I gotta eat.
Yeah, 100%.
That's not a fair question to ask.
No.
But it also is a question that gets asked of people that care about community or activists. Is like, you're supposed to give all you are and expect nothing. And if you expect anything or want anything, then it means you care about it less. So unfair. That's never been a reality for anything we do. You know? That's not the reality of how we love. It's not the reality of how we foster relationships. So that's not the reality.
No.
Stop expecting all of us for very minimal. And that's supposed to be the bar. Hell no. I'm not accepting poverty as an exchange for my soul and ink.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
So you think that was it? It was just like literally mental, because I've thought the same thing. Like there's just a mental barrier. Like if there's money to be made in something, you can make that money with it. Like you just have to be hungry enough. You have to chase it. Sometimes you need to be pushed in the right direction to be sent in the right avenues. But like, yeah, I'm so the same. It'd be definitely so much more in poetry. Like I feel like I've heard like what 80% of poets can't like fund their own life just based off their poetry or something like that.
Absolutely not. Even if you're successful, you still can't.
Yeah.
You have to be exceptional. You have to really, I mean exceptional in like the roundedness. Like your art can be great, but it's how good are you at marketing, how good are you at branding, how good are you on stage with question Q&As, how good are you at these type of things. The multifacetedness of how you exist is very, very important. And some people feel like they should just be able to do the art and that it speaks for themselves. And I'm like, in what world? I don't know where the hell that's a world.
Even athletes and stuff need to promote themselves. Everyone
you gotta
does
be able to
now.
get sponsorship. You gotta be likable. You gotta be all these variable things, no matter what job
All
that
about
you do.
personal branding.
Absolutely. So it's a struggle though, because I'm like, I just want to create, and I don't want to be restricted
You
by
don't
the
wanna be doing
funding
all
or the money or people telling me how this project is supposed to look when they're also non-artist.
Yeah.
Like it's a hard grind, but also like, how much of yourself do you give to this, knowing that it can be unpredictable?
Do you get people to ask you to do stuff way cheaper than you think you deserve all the time?
Absolutely.
All the time.
Absolutely. People want the best person for the least amount of money possible.
Yeah.
Sucks.
Consistently.
Yeah.
And like, they don't even know what they're paying for. So it's like, oh, I want you only for like a few minutes. Yeah, I gotta get there, I gotta train, I gotta write this poem, I gotta edit it, I gotta perform, I gotta engage with everybody in the room after I leave, I gotta promote. No.
I guess that's a thing I haven't thought about with poetry. Sometimes you won't be there for long. Your whole poetry could be 10 minutes, right?
Yep.
Or less.
Yeah. So normally your poetry sells like 15 minutes, 30. That's
not much.
like people really want you. But this is a grilling 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And when you talk about, people want to engage and connect, and I love, that's my favorite part, is being able to connect with people and see how much frequency it's like really poured out into the audience. But yeah, that notion of like the art versus the money is stupid. It's a stupid conversation that I don't like having. That to me seems so obvious.
Yeah.
But we're still having it. Like, you want me to drop a book, edit it, polish it, write my whole life story in it, and then deal with it being on a bookshelf collecting dust? I beg.
I think we're lucky because we can tell people how much our camera equipment costs, but you don't really have that to tell people. Like, they don't know the hours you put into it every day, and the heart, the soul, everything.
Oh no, and that's why it's important for people to know exactly what they're charging for. But like, there's
Do you have
so,
to actually explain that to them sometimes?
honestly, like, there are base rates, but like, I don't. I'm learning to just say no. I can't do it. But I also just like poetry so much. Sometimes I'm just like, I just want to do this set. I gotta I gotta clear my chest. You know what I mean? It's not really about y'all at all. You just happen to be here. You know? But there's a few challenges. Like, I really want, poetry has a really bad rep for being the shit you read in like 10th grade English class. And you gotta undo that. Like, if you're a musician, like by default, it's kind of cool. If you're a dancer, by default, it's cool. If you're a DJ, it's cool. If you're a poet, everyone's like, they don't know what to expect. But it's also it can be really cool. Like, when I go to schools to teach, and they're like, oh, poetry teacher's coming up, and no one knows what to expect. And when they think of someone, it's like, not me. So when I show up and I've got like kicks on and a big baggie, I'm like, yo, and they're like,
it changes everything.
They're like, you're the poet? I'm like, hell yeah, I am. And it's like that rebranding poetry again with faces and young people and different types of stories. And that is really, really special. Like, I went to, it was some small town in New South Wales. And I was teaching a workshop to like young kids. And they put a flyer with like just my name, no picture. Like 2 kids signed up. Then they pull my picture up, 20 kids signed up. And the teacher was like, we don't know if it's because you're pretty or because you're young or because it's
We're just
both.
expecting
But
someone's
no
grey
one was
hair.
interested until they knew who was teaching it.
I was just expecting someone named Pauline or something.
And I'm like, hey, I'm Huda the Goddess. Look at my kicks. And they're like, ah.
Where I met you with Sam, like all the creative people and like all the poets and stuff, I didn't know that existed, especially here. And my first thought was like, the world needs to see this.
They do. I'm itching.
They really do. Like, they just need to know that there's like African poets in Brisbane and stuff, because if we're honest, like 90% of people or more probably have no idea that's the thing.
And that's why it's like, this is the call to action to all poets everywhere, is like, be everywhere. You're like music.
Yeah. So you don't
Music
feel like
plays
you
in
have
every
to
room.
try and be mostly in front of an African audience?
Nah,
Not
I'm
at all.
everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm an artist. I belong in every room.
It's like we were saying in the beginning of the conversation, your stories can relate to anyone. Like whether, like it doesn't, your story about growing up in Cairo might relate to someone who grew up in New South Wales just because, you know, they had a certain like, alignment with your story. But what I wanted to ask was what are your biggest visual cues that you get? So like with a comedian, they're telling jokes, they got punchlines, so they either get a laugh or they don't. What do you look for to know that you're getting
Everyone
Oh.
engagement?
sitting there crying.
Yeah, people like cry. They're sitting there like jaws on the floor. Obviously, it's going to depend on this.
They do the clicking as well.
Yeah, well, there's predictable stuff like teaching people how to snap is like a way of letting people know, like people knowing. This is going to sound corny, but I can feel the room when it's with me.
Yeah.
I just know. And like, because of the way that I speak, silence is actually how I know everyone's with me.
Yeah.
And it's actually very uncomfortable because I don't know, even though I understand it now, it's questionable to me. Because I'm like, what does the silence mean? Is everybody
Have you seen
confused?
people filming and just put their phone down and watch you?
Yeah, people will start and then be like caught off like in the middle,
That's
like
so cool.
whoa, and it's like I don't know what the whoa means. So snaps for me is easily I can translate it to you're with me because that's what it means in poetry. All the other cues are a bit unclear sometimes, and like because I know that I can be very deep and intense and straight to it. My only cues is silence, and I'll ask, I'll be like, hey, yo, y'all are very quiet, and it's making me nervous. And somebody like, well, where's you? Like somebody will cue, and then everybody else will clap. So I'm happy to be vulnerable with people on stage. Like I need you to be present with me, more than just your physical body. I need to hear you. I need to see you gesturing. But I have a rule on stage where I find one anchor in the audience. It's one person who I know is with me. And that's the person I come back to every time.
That's always been my tip for public speaking.
Yeah.
Like choose one person basically in the audience to speak to. And then like everyone else, you're occasionally going to glance in that direction, but like you're only really focusing on this one person.
Yeah.
And they're just staring back at you the whole time.
Yeah.
It's like we've been looking at each other. It's like there could be 100 other people behind you.
But it's
just
like
talking
one,
to you. Yeah.
And it keeps, but on stage you also learn to find people that are on the all 3 points so that your eyes traveling around it.
That's a big like theater acting thing. Like you got to project to every corner and make sure everyone's.
You know, it's so funny. I don't have any formal training in public speaking or any of those things. Those are just natural things that I've learned through being a public speaker since I was like 16. Where it's like I know, like you can't ignore one side of the room. That's just dumb. Like to me, it's common sense.
Have you had audiences that you did not think would be interested, or like for the first 10 seconds they weren't, or 20 seconds, and then all of a sudden?
I've had so many skeptical audiences. High school students are some of the hardest
that would be
people
hard.
to get on anything.
Yeah.
And I
Surely you can hear like like them talking like in the background.
I did. Oh, I can't remember where it was, but
That
I
would
went
be
to
hard.
school and like I came in. There was nothing. It said nothing. And I was just like, hey, yo, my name is, and they were just like intensively like listening. And then after I finished, they're like, whoa, miss, that was so cool. And I was like, I've been speaking for like 10 minutes. Why are you only just yelling now? Oh my God.
I guess they don't know how to even react.
They
Because they're not
really-
used to poets and stuff.
That part. But I've definitely had audiences where I'm like, I think I've lost them. I don't think we're on the same page. I don't think we're there.
Yeah.
But I don't think,
Because you don't know like what big words
touch wood,
to use and stuff.
I've never performed in front of an audience that I don't feel like I've registered with. Even if they weren't with me, they'll bite.
It's impressive.
I'll get them at some point. Yeah. But usually it's because at least somebody is there for poetry. So I can guarantee that I will get the room eventually. But we've had hard rooms. Like when I was on tour, we did like
What was the hardest?
Oh, we did a school and it's like 120 kids in the auditorium. You got shit all. They said nothing. There's only one kid that had questions for us. Silence. It was the most difficult, like 30, 40 minutes of my tour. I was like, oh my God. Yeah. And it was so funny because it was just like a cultural thing. Let's have like a very no shame culture. Like we were not going to speak up, that's shame. I got off stage and they were playing basketball with me and reciting some of the poetry I said back that they remembered, giving me painting to take. I'm like, where was this energy when I was on stage, bro? But they were very I was like, yep, I've lost every kid in this room. There is no way they're with me. There's no way they get what the hell I'm talking about. But I'm going to maintain the confidence and stay relaxed because, kids will smell fear. Yeah. And you have to you got to double down on the fact that, nah, this is cool. And
even if you trip over the wrong word in front of a group of kids, like you've lost them.
And
if you accidentally say shit or something.
Wait, what's the youngest age of these kids?
The youngest I probably taught is like 10-year-olds.
Yeah, so some of them.
But these kids were from like year 6, 7 to like year 12. That's probably a really hard crowd when you get such a big age range.
Yeah, that would be.
Where it goes from like not much thought besides Xbox to like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I'm turning 18. That's a very big variety to talk to. And you have to speak to them in a way that everybody can feel like you're not dumbing things down or you're not speaking too difficult. Yeah. That's probably the biggest challenge performance-wise as poet, is how do you create language that in certain rooms can just read? Yeah. Which is why I think sometimes poets can lose a room. But again, hey, keep to your art, keep true to your art. You don't owe anybody else to bend your language for them. But that was like, when I teach kids, I'm like, yo, it's about to be on my A game because these kids will let you know if they don't like this shit.
Have you ever done elderly?
Yes.
How's that?
I feel like elderly people that are looking for this sort of stuff are so wholesome. Like elderly people that go to like community events or like that are just like looking for creative sort of, like it's always, you see them, they might be 30 years older than everyone else in the crowd, but you're just like, damn it, you love it. Like you must have been the only person back in your day like fighting for it, and now
and they just appreciate art.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it doesn't have to just be like art, but just things that are just like community based or just things that aren't like giant events, you know, like it's, I don't know, there's something wholesome about it.
Yeah, I've done like, I don't know, Armadale, small town. And it was just like, just out, like, we're talking about like youngest person, that was probably 40. But they were just so like appreciative of the fact that we're coming to this small town, and they were just like, you're incredible. And I was like, thank you so much. But they're so, it's like, when people really receive you, it's beautiful. And
you're kind of like a rock star in a way.
I'm like, oh my God, I'm like kind of cool. I love it. But no, it's funny to think about like the poetry's cool. I've been having these like little moments where like people are like, oh, you know what's your relationship like with your fans? I'm like, please don't use that word. That's ick. I don't have fans. I have readers. Don't do that. But yeah, I did like a very small community event for this beatboxer who runs like a little open mic. And I got off stage and I was talking to this beautiful old lady. She's like, your poetry's so beautiful. And she's like, you know, like, it gives me mom vibes. She's like, oh, like, she was actually a grandparent. She's like, my granddaughter actually wants to talk to you. She's a big fan. And I was like, oh, that's really sweet. And she comes and the girl's hyperventilating. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm meeting you. We watch all your YouTube videos. And
You're
we
like
know
a
who
celebrity.
I'm going to tell
we
all my...
underreacted then.
Right, I'm like,
hey.
I'm like, hi.
Wait, do we even know who you are coming on?
I was like, and she's like, I've read your stuff and I've got a group of friends and I'm going to tell them that I've met you. And she's like, hypervent. I'm like, I'm a poet. Like, it's not required this much.
That's cool.
This
pretty cool,
much engagement.
That's really cool though.
But it was really tough because she's like 14.
Yeah.
It was such a beautiful,
but you
wholesome
never know
woman.
like how much your stuff related with her. Like she might have been having a shit day once, and like you just made it.
And I was like,
great.
that's so nice. I love it. But yeah, it was one of those moments where I was like, oh, maybe I have fans.
But even just someone living in a random place, not somewhere you grew up in or whatever. It's interesting.
Yeah, like when I went to Singapore, I was supposed to do a book reading and my book didn't arrive on the day I had a performance.
Yeah.
And I got messages on Instagram.
Chaos.
Yeah, it's chaos, yeah. And like,
Book reading, no book, sorry guys.
I was like, am I doing it? But now I'm going back to my hotel. And I got messages, people
Sign my
like,
hand.
I'm so disappointed I came to see you and I couldn't get I was like, how the hell do y'all know who I am? Let's focus on that first. Scratch all of this out. How do you know who I am? Why were you waiting?
The first Australian in nationals.
Yeah, I was like, huh? You
have a
have
name?
moments feel like, oh, this is cool. Because to me, I'm regular. I live around the block. I'm privileged to even be here. This is so exciting. So for you to know who I didn't expect anyone to know who I am or remember me after this. So the fact that there's an imprint left so much that people were like disappointed. Like, when are you coming back to Singapore?
Must
Like,
feel good in a way.
I was like, she's a big girl. She's well known. Okay.
Get you
It's cool that it's you personally too, and not just your story too. Like some
Yeah.
people might just go like, oh, the story you said was amazing, but it seems more about like your personality that actually captivates people.
I feel like I think people are so surprised when they see me on a panel versus on stage too. Like, because I'm stage, I'm like when I'm performing the poetry, it's very serious. This is why I designed my set to have a little comedy in it, so that people can hear like, I'm just kind of regular. I'm just really good at writing poetry. That's kind of it.
You're not thinking about these things 24/7.
Yeah, like it's just for this really dope moment,
yeah.
I'm here. But I think that's what creates a connection with people. Like, oh wow, like, oh, you're young.
You're
oh,
human.
And I think it's really important to give people that. It also relieves the pressure for me in that sense of like, hey guys, I'm just Huda, and I really like poetry.
You said that like people don't find poetry cool because of the way they've been raised and through school and stuff, but I think you've really given that to people, like that it can be cool, can be different.
Yeah. Well, I think it's cool, and I'm pretty cool.
Yeah.
So it has to be. It's
agree.
a science.
I agree.
It's a science, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm very convinced like we need to see poetry for what it is, and it's an opportunity to have. I'm doing a TEDx talk about actually next year, like
Doing a TED talk.
yeah,
That's awesome.
about like writing poetry as therapy, and this was poetry was my first therapist that allowed me to actually pull apart this experiences that I've had in my life and allowed me to heal. Before I could afford a therapist, before I could go to somebody and talk about my problems, my page was welcoming.
That's
and my
definitely a
ink
line
was
in
rich.
the talk, isn't it?
I don't know, maybe. Hey, extract it. Puts it in my speech. But no, poetry has been healing and therapeutic and allowed me to evolve and find myself. And I think one thing I'd love is to give people the opportunity to find that. I want to be able to teach people how to write their own story and find their own healing within their own space and be in charge of that. There is a power of owning your story that's incredible and freeing, so freeing. So it's like beyond showcasing that poetry is cool as hell, it's about poetry can be done by anybody and people should dabble. Maybe it's not for stage, maybe it's not to win a national cup, and it's okay, but it can be your therapy. So I get excited when people are like, oh, you made me want to write. I'm like, yeah.
I actually think there'd be a lot of people that are into it but hide it.
Oh yeah, I'd say most.
Oh
Most
my God,
people.
yeah. 'Cause it's
Especially
not
guys.
cool.
I've written poems that no
Especially
one's seen.
guys.
Like I've got a book that no one's literally known. Like
Can I-
my plan is no one ever sees this
Can I
book.
see it?
No.
It's like for miles only.
One time I went through it, I saw a page I'd ripped out. I was like, oh, I wonder what source
That was
stuff I
dark in
wrote.
that
Yeah. Well, look, how we normally wrap the episodes is asking the guest some advice they would give for people in their field. Your advice seems to be like stick in your lane, tell your story kind of thing. So a bit more specific then, what advice do you have to people to tell their own story?
I think to the people just writing, allow poetry to allow you to get to know yourself. Use it as a sense of exploration. You will never run out of stories to tell. It is really hard to have writer's block when you're writing about you consistently.
There's a David Bowie quote that I've definitely said on this before, but he said something to the lines of creative people, the reason you got into it was to create something that you thought would teach you more about yourself. And that to me is so profound. Like everything I've created, I've been like, oh, I had to get this out to realize that this was in me kind of thing. Like,
Bingo. And that's what it is. That's the power then about writing about yourself. Is that one, you're never on like a contact, but two, you learn so much about yourself, and things become more clear when they come out of here and are placed somewhere else, so that you can read them and relearn about yourself through that. So I think always be selfish within your art. Your art belongs to you. It is about you, for you, first and foremost. And if you continue to own it in the sense of, yeah, this is where I thrive, this is where I live, this is where I explore, this is where I unpack pain. But also I say this, man, to poets, build a healthy relationship with the pen. Do not just make it a place where you go to vent or to be in pain. Allow it to be a point of celebration and growth and evolution and your home. And your home can't always be like one corner is a psych ward. Like the whole room can't be a psych ward of craziness. Some point has to be where you paint and where you dance and where you relax. So have a good relationship with the pen where when you pick it up, you don't always feel heavy. Sometimes it's allowed to be light. Sometimes you can write about butterflies and rainbows and all the good stuff, as much as you are writing about pain and grief and whatever it is. But on a professional tip, take chances and be bold. Your art is only as limited as where you put it. It's one thing for poetry to live in a book. It's another thing for it to live in a video, but it's another thing for it to live in an installation, for it to be an AI, for it to be a painting, for it to be, it can be wherever you want it to be. Is it hard? Absolutely. Does it always seem possible? No. Is it going to be is there going to be a lot of failure? Yeah.
If you haven't seen it done before, it doesn't mean that it's not a good thing to do.
You're saying, don't limit yourself.
Be willing to
Don't look at poetry as it's this one thing, but it could be anything.
Be willing to be revolutionary about it. Be willing to be the pioneer of something no one has ever seen before. But also just accept the fact that if you want it to grow, you have to be in charge of its growth. That is on you to see how much you can do with it. And it's complicated, and it's not always the most fun thing to do. You do have to brand, and you do have to market, and you do have to worry about not just writing well, but presenting well, getting on stage well, being interviewed well, being able to take the photos and doing all of it. And all of that comes from owning your poetry. If it's mine, I look after it differently. I look at it differently. I value it differently because it's mine. But when it's about everybody else, you're always changing it depending on who needs it tailored where. So it never feels complete. It's always needing to readjust. But if it's yours, it's not adjusting, it's evoluting. It's growing, it's manifesting. It's allowing yourself to be much greater. So to the future poets, become friends with your pen and enjoy it for everything that it is. And let it be light, let it be heavy, let it be truthful, let it be reflective of who you are. Become an observer of the world that you live in, but also be able to sit back and live so you can write. It's a really important thing. Keep living so you can write more. But in the process of creation, have the audacity that no one wants to give you the permission to do. Have the boldness and the utter nerve to think you can create some shit that is magic. And accept the fact that it won't be easy. It just is what it is.
Love that. Love that. That was great. I think we can end perfectly on that. Huda, that was great. Where can people find you?
Huda the Goddess, Instagram, follow me. I have a lot of video projects coming up. If you do live in this beautiful city, Black Ink, the 11th of November, Vent Space is the new home where artists come, fail, and fail safely, but also create and find their own space and creation. So Huda the Goddess. If you're looking for me, you'll find me. And if your soul needs me, I'll be in the room eventually.
Awesome. I think we'll be looking. One last shout out to Marty and Catalog Music, this beautiful venue that lets us, put into our amazing podcast here. Thank you, Marty. Thank you, Catalog. And thank you, Huda.
I just want to ask something really quickly. Do you just see the world through poetry?
Yeah, pretty much. I speak the way I write.
Exactly. It's like
people
the way you talk
is
is just
doing
so
poetry.
poetic.
I'm like, I am poetry.
Yeah.
It's not a thing that I do.
Yeah.
I am it.
Yep.
So I never run out of poetry.
You were it before you even knew you were it. Poet, you didn't even know it.
My whole life. So people are like, when did you become a poet? I've always been that.
Yeah.
You were born a poet.
There was no it wasn't a job I had to apply for. I've been speaking like this. I've been speaking cursive. I've been speaking in pictures. This is the reality of how I create the world that I live in. Is I speak it, I feel it as thoroughly as I do. Like the conviction and the passion people read is how I live.
It's like when you go to Paris, people are so emotive and
Yeah.
It's just me, you know?
Now, look, I think one closing note, my whole life I've loved the word audacity. I think I've always looked at it in a negative viewpoint, you've made me think about it slightly more positively in terms of you need to have the audacity. I think that's probably my big takeaway from this one.
I mean, how else you gonna create the world if you ain't got no audacity? Ain't nobody gonna give it to you. People aren't handing out confidence. They're like, here, go ahead, do what you wanna do. They're like, humble yourself. Fuck that. Have audacity, create. Some of the greatest artists in the world just go, you know what? I'm gonna fill this room up with 1,000 people. Let's see what happens. Everyone's like, oh, you think you owe that? Yes. Yes. I think I'm owe that.
Yep. Beautiful.
You know?
Should we do a shout out to Powerade?
Powerade. Come on, man, listen. I got sneakers in every color. I can match every single one of your Powerades. Make it happen.
Awesome. Thanks, Huda.
Thank you so much. No, it's my pleasure.